This is an adorable tissue cozy that I made for my twins' teacher for Christmas, and I'm going to walk you through step by step how I constructed this box.
Okay, so for the first step, what I did was I took just a regular piece of poster board from the dollar store, and I'm not showing this part because that is way too big to put on the camera. So I took it and I just made little marks at the top and bottom and just hacked at it with my scissors until I got it down to a manageable size where I could actually use my cutter. For this side, I just drew the line all the way across and then used my scissors. And then for the panels, this is the inside of my box. Okay? This is what is going to go over the tissue box. And for the panels, I did 5 1/4 for each panel. And then I did a 1/2 inch on the end to create an overlap to adhere. Okay? I did make this 7 inches tall because I would like to use 1/2 inch to, I'm going to cut down 1/2 inch and I'm going to fold that in to kind of give the top something to adhere to so it's not just trying to adhere to the skinny little line and have it separate. So that's the first step, is to get a piece of poster board, cut out to make the inside of your box. Okay, 5 1/4 by 7 inches tall. 5 1/4, 5 1/4, 5 1/4, 5 1/4, and a half. This works out to 21.5 inches out of regular poster board. So I decided what size I wanted my 3 books and what size that I wanted the binding for each one to give it some varied look, because the wider you make your binding, the thicker the binding is going to look against the side of your tissue box here. So the 3 sizes that I chose were 7 by 5 3/4, 7 by 8, and 8 1/2 by 8. And I cut out 2 pieces, one piece for the front of the book, one piece for the back. And you can stack yours square if you would like and put the box in the dead center. But I didn't want mine to look like that. The reason why I made mine varying sizes is because I wanted my bindings to stagger so that I had some room to play and do some embellishments and some flowers and such. So by doing this, what I then did was I took mine and I lined them up. And I'm going to use, for my visual, I'm going to use this side as my binding side. So I'm going to pretend like I already have these done. And what I just did was I took the center one and I just skewed it a tad. And I made the top small one and the bottom big one going in the exact same direction. And then I just placed my tissue box right on top to see how it would line up and make sure that it didn't hang off any parts of the books. So now I'm going to take my pencil and I'm just going to kind of trace. Because my box is kind of bowing a little bit, you can't exactly put this on and trace it. So instead what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just go ahead and draw my measurements. And since my box is 5 1/4 by 5 1/4, I did indicate one corner. So I'm going to start Now that we've got our opening traced on our top book, we are going to cut out the hole for the tissue box
but we're only going to cut it out of the bottom of our book because remember, the top of our book is going to lay on the top of the box and is going to have the small opening where the tissues come out.
But now we've got a template for our box. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your center section and you're going to tape down the edges. We're going to place this right about where we placed the other one. Okay, and then we're going to trace. And now go ahead and cut out your inner square there for your tissue box and then use this middle one as a template. Okay, so for the very top piece, what we're going to do here is we're going to find the exact center and we're going to put a hole there that's 2 by 2 for the tissues to come through. Make sure too, if you're using a pattern such that has any sort of direction, for example, this goes at an angle, so you want to make sure that your pattern completely goes at an angle. So I'll show you the way that you should do each piece, but it will be as if you had a new piece of paper. So go ahead and line up the binding edge. And we're going to do this just like we do any sort of chipboard album. So go ahead and put your glue directly on your chipboard, or in this case I'm using poster board because I had a lot of it. It's kind of flimsy though. I wish I had had something a little bit firmer. Even if it was just cereal boxes, I really like to use cereal boxes. So just get it lined up on that one edge. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then go ahead and burnish it. And then once you've got that burnished, we're going to start by doing the corners. And we're going to do the corners the same way that we did on the other one. Remember, you want to fold in on the white corner. The white tip is your pivot point. So this corner, if you notice, is a tad off because my two don't line up, and that's okay. They don't have to, but just make sure that the guide that you use is actually the white or the chipboard. And then I'm just scoring to help me fold. I've decided that I'm just going to cover the actual tissue box cover itself and just use this as the pages for the books because it would be too difficult to try to add something else to it. So what we're going to do is take our handy dandy medium So now that you've got the pieces of what's going to be your books all covered, it's time to do the binding. To do the binding of the books, what you're going to do is you're going to want to measure the binding edge. This edge is 8.5. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that my binding goes from edge to edge. And then I want to make sure that it overlaps on the top and the bottom. And one thing I've found is that you want to make sure that it goes all the way over. You want at least 1 inch of overlap. So on the top books, which were a tad bit smaller, what I ended up doing was covering it, and then where the binding edge overlapped the hole, I just turned it over and used my X-Acto knife to cut my hole back out. Okay? Since these pieces are bigger, we're not going to need to do that. The other thing that you need to do is you need to know exactly how big you need your binding. So here's the pieces that I've already done. I'm going to go ahead and slide these onto my tissue box. And this binding is going to be on the bottom edge here. So we want to make sure that it's big enough to fit this space here. So what I do is I figure 3 inches for the binding, and then I add 1 inch for the top and 1 inch for the bottom. So I want this piece to be 5 inches wide. Here's the paper that I'm going to be using, and we're cutting this at 8.5 by 5 inches. I do have some edges that stick out, so then what I do is I take my decorative corner punch that I've chosen for this project, and I just snip the corners. Now take your piece and grab a bottle and roll your piece on the bottle. It just helps to break the paper down and make it a little bit easier to work with. And now we're going to take this and we're going to adhere it. Remember, I said I wanted 1 inch. So take your ruler and your pencil, line the edge up, and make a mark at 1 inch. And on this side, line up the edge marker and come in 1 inch. And down here at 1 inch, and here at 1 inch. When gluing your pieces together, make sure that you've got your square lined up so you know what's going to be your top and what's going to be your bottoms. And the way we're going to do the binding is the top gets glued on, will get glued on like this. The bottom will get glued on like this, just like a book. Okay? So this honestly could be a flimsy book cover. Okay, and before you go bending this, go ahead and set it aside and give it a little bit of time to dry. Now we're going to go back to the pieces that are already on here. We're going to add that piece from the bottom. And for this part, what we're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure everything is level. So go ahead and grab a level. This is a bullet level. It's nice and small and lightweight. And you just place the level on your piece and make sure that the bubble lines up in between the 2 lines on your level. If the bubble lines up between those 2 lines, things are level. Once you get your piece level, go ahead and throw in a dollop of glue in the edges on the corners.
So the way that you glue the books to the side of the tissue box is you use your pencil and you make a mark using the bullet level and then put a dollop of glue there. And because the poster board is flexible, you can push it out to meet the sides of your book. Here's the finished product. I'm not going to show you
a whole bunch of video with me just gluing stuff on. I think we've done enough embellishing. If you have any questions, please feel free to either leave a comment here. I do check back frequently to answer any questions, or you can find me over at the Swirly Doo site in the forums. I truly hope you appreciated this, and I hope you decide to try one for yourself.